President Trump's decision to release all January 6 defendants seems to have divided some folks in his own party. His blanket pardon, essentially for 1,500 defendants, which happened just hours after he was sworn in, was something that he had campaigned on. This was a promise that he had made while he was on the campaign trail to all of his supporters. And for many people, he made good on that promise. But now some are worried that the order was perhaps too broad. And experts are warning that it could embolden other extremists. So let's go to Jake Rosen, who's standing by to talk about this. Jake, what are you hearing from those folks who may have been critical in the 72 hours since the president pardoned those individuals?
Well, Vlad, since these pardons came down a couple of days ago, we've seen at least 5 senators say that they're not happy with the way that Donald Trump did this, especially in the way that he pardoned violent criminals. Now, we know that there's been kind of this gray area since January 6th of what happens to the people who are maybe going into the Capitol and kind of caught in the storm, weren't necessarily charged with violence on police officers or destruction of property or things like that. It appears as although that this was a blanket pardon, where basically Donald Trump did what a lot of his close advisors have been telling him to do since back on the campaign trail, like you mentioned, which was to blanket pardon everyone. This is something that a lot of the farther right parts of the party, especially that kind of internet kind of conglomerate of people who are influencers and talk to the former president or now current president, are engaged in, and they lobbied for this for a very long time. People like Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Tom Tillis all came out saying that they did not believe that there should be blanket pardons for these people. There should have been a case-by-case basis of doing this. Even Mike Johnson and J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's now vice president, said that he didn't believe that there should be blanket pardons either, and Speaker Johnson echoed that as well. So certainly Donald Trump kind of spurring the advice of those closest to him, in addition to kind of embracing that further right part of the party, although, as you pointed out, this is really something that Donald Trump said he would do from day one of his administration.
So can you explain, Jake, the warnings that these pardons could actually embolden extremists, whether domestic or otherwise?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that Enrique Tarrio, who led the Proud Boys, and Stuart Rhodes, who led the Oath Keepers on January 6th, and were massive leaders in what happened in that day in terms of the organized violence and chaos that we saw on Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2021. Now that they're outside of prison, they're able to potentially reorganize, and the lesson might not have been learned, right? Stuart Rhodes was sentenced to 18 years of prison in prison for his actions on that day. He barely served a fourth of that sentence, as we know, and by just a slap on the wrist and Donald Trump commuting the sentence of some people, pardoning fully others. There have only been a handful of these January 6th prisoners and people who have now been freed who have basically rejected that pardon and said that they feel like what they did that day was wrong. A lot of them, including the QAnon shaman Jacob Chansley, said he was going to go buy a gun now that he was pardoned and is no longer technically a felon, in addition to, again, just kind of these organized groups that kind of maybe took a back seat over the last couple of years because of these intense prosecutions by the Biden DOJ. Now that the weight is off of them, we'll have to see. And experts and political violence experts have been warning that this basically gives them a green light, or at least a yellow light, to continue organizing and doing what they had been doing before January 6th.
All right, Jake Rosen for us from Washington. Jake, thank you very much.